Okay, my friends, this is gonna be a shocker. Everybody's heard of Quetzalcoatl, or most people, and he is a mythological creature that they found in all of the ancient codex when the first Europeans arrived here, and they burnt all those codex, except some survived. And they have some, like I believe this is authentic or a representation of this authentic, but this is what Quetzalcoatl looked like. Now, here's what I want you to remember about Quetzalcoatl. Well, he eats people. Now, you don't want to run into that guy in the woods. Now, what is all this feathers coming out of his head? That's his crown coming out. Now, what is this? That's a little beard. And his whole body runs up, and he has all feathers and fluty feathers all up his body, and especially at the end. Now, could that have been real? Yes, it could have been, and yes, it was. Okay, my friends, I just sketched over the top of this very briefly, so quickly, so that you could see the outline, and this is the feathers on his head. I'm going to show you all the way up the East Coast. This is the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. You see this color, and you see that color? I'm going to erase the things I put on here, and you can go back to this if you want to look at what I showed you here, if you can't follow it, and you should be able to follow it very easily. Alright, so now I just removed all the stuff I put on. All you have to do is see the difference in color. The difference in color means there's a different chemistry there. The chemistry creates the color of the crops. Simple as that. This is something totally different than this. Now, up here is the feathers, and we can actually see the feather patterns. And Quetzalcoatl, I don't know if you ever saw him. Let me just show you what he looks like. Oh, you see that? That's Quetzalcoatl. All right? Now, you see, here's the things I want you to remember. All of those fluty feathers coming out of his head. The beard coming off right down in here. All right, he's got a little sort of a bump on his nose, and then he snakes all the way up, and he has all kinds of feathery things going on. Now, this looks like some jewelry or something. I don't know whether he has that. I can't find any of that stuff, but I can find everything else. Let's go back and look. And he was well, he was eating people. This is stuff that they found. These are things that they actually had written down in their documents when the, I guess it was the Spanish arrived here, whoever. And here's another one over here, look. He was, there's a lot of thinking to do now. Once you realize these things had some validity to them. Alright, I showed, or I will show you, that this is coming right out of the dragon's mouth, Quetzalcoatl. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, dragon spit. So this is Myron Cook. I'd love to engage with him because he's a geologist, and he makes a lot of videos showing how he feels that this was, all anomalies. I love that. I absolutely love it. I'd love to be able to engage with him, and I'm trying. So if anybody knows Myron, ask him to engage with me. He's a geologist. I feel I'm highly qualified to speak in that realm. As you will see from my video, I have a completely different take on things, but my take is, I feel, correct. Alright, I have a selection of feathers here we're going to be looking at in the microscope, because I claim that I will show you the feathers of Quetzalcoatl. They are on the earth, and they are probably a little larger than you would have expected. Okay, we're going to be looking at what I'm going to tell you is feathers, and we'll be looking at these in the microscope and comparing them to what feathers look like. We just happen to have an expert on feathers here, Caesar. Of course, he's got feathers. He knows all about them. Oh, he concurs. He said, yeah, absolutely, Roger. No question whatsoever. Thanks, Caesar. Appreciate your input, my friend. Now, we are going to be looking at these in a microscope, and we're going to be comparing it to the ribs and the flutes on those feathers. And of course, I do have a feather here that is a little bigger than your average feather. It's this one right here. And this, I will show you where it came from. It's about 3 inches thick. You see, that's one side of the feather, that's the other side. That's a good sized feather. And all this is the tiniest, tiniest, tiniest little place as this is. These things were very, very large. Alright, this is where this feather came from. This gigantic feather here. And it's not like the whole feather and this is all the flute sticking away. This is the tiniest little piece right in between where these come out. It's just the tiniest little thing you can imagine. This is 3 inches thick, that feather. So this is no puppy. And see, one side is really bright and the other side is kind of dull. That's just what happens with feathers. See, that's the dull side, that's the bright side. Same thing with here. That's the bright side, that's the dull side. They all have the same. That's gigantic feather, and that's a road right next to it. And this is the tiniest little bit within these little tiny flutes. Okay, I want you to see what you're looking at right there. Alright, and I want you to see we're looking at a feather in the microscope. And here it is right up here. Now, can you see that ridge right through the center there? Sometimes this doesn't focus all that well, but you see that? That's the center of that feather. And this is the center of that feather. And that is a feather, and that is a feather on Google Earth. So prepare yourself. Okay, my friends, Roger strikes again. You see this feather pattern here? See that feather? You see the little ridges on the running down the tube there? And the center and all the little flutes coming out of them that are feathers. Well, I'm going to show you on Google Earth, right there. That is the same thing I just showed you up above there in the microscope. That was from a feather right there, which is I believe that's a crow feather. And I know what kind of feather that is, and you'll see it in a second. And that is the same as this right here. You see it? Running right down the center. Same. Now, so what does that mean? Well, it means that some of the things that were written in the past are quite likely true. Now, running off the side of that is the actual edges of the feather. This is just the tiniest little flute. Now, we're going to be coming back and looking at this in its totality and what the creature was that was attached to this feather. First of all, you say, "Oh, Roger, can you show me that that's part of a creature?" And I say, "Yes, I can." You see all this? That's a feather. I'm saying these are feathers running up here. Now, where are they running from? This is all feathers, these green, fluty looking things. They're running from the head of Quetzalcoatl, who is this dragon right here. That is his dragon head. And it runs all the way up the east coast. And this is his dragon face right here. And this is his dragon beard right here. Remember the beards. Remember the dragon face. Remember the flutes. Remember these flutes. This is very important. These are all the flutes that ran off his head. Now, as we go up the body, this thing is the whole east coast. It goes right up here. This is his body. Runs all the way up. You see these? This is more feathers up here. Those are feathers up here. Exactly what it shows in the ancient codex of what Quetzalcoatl was like. This is exactly it. He had all that flary looking stuff at the end of his tail. Now, I don't know if he had any of those bracelets and things down here. I couldn't find any of that. But I can tell you what, he goes all the way up to Canada. This is all part of Quetzalcoatl. You see that? All the way up. Now, the reason I'm talking about Quetzalcoatl, I have talked about him before, but Myron Cook, who is a geologist, was saying he had an explanation for this feature here. And I do too. Quetzalcoatl spit out at it. If it was a creature, I don't know. I looked at this before trying to figure, was it a creature he was trying to kill? Because the one in the desert was obviously trying to kill the fish. Now, and the fish could have been easily this size or bigger. Now, is this a tail of something? Or is this the snout of something? I don't know. I couldn't really make anything of this, although I can see that Quetzalcoatl spit whatever it was out here. All of this stuff is part of his bodily functions spitting out, and it all landed on here and ate into whatever this was, and it made a mess out of it. You see that? It just made a mess. All right, very, very, very messy. Very, very, very similar to the messy stuff that came out of Typhon over in the desert. We're going to go look at that right now. But this is spit right out. And where do you see the outline of his head? Check these river systems out. Look at this. Look at all these little... Here it goes. Let me come in here. You see? Watch all the way up here. All on that edge is these little tiny fluty river systems. You see it? All on the whole edge of his body. Now, they have to be some form of blood vessels. And they go everywhere. I mean, it's the entire edge of his body. The entire edge of his body has that. Now, he also has some of those inside of his body. You see, like these ones here, all these loopy things. I believe that's his throat. And where he spit out all that stuff coming out. And it went right into the desert. I mean, into the ocean there. Now, what are these things? I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, are those like man-made oil rigs or something? I don't know. Because they're only right here. And that was where he would spit out. That's exactly where it would come. And it would go splatter all over here. Now, let's go look at Typhon in the desert. And you're going to see the damage his spit did. Woo. It ate right the whole flesh off of the fish. We're going to see that in a second. And I'm sorry, what they had written is true, and it's so unbelievably, incredibly large, these creatures. I have no way to explain this. I don't know what they did. I don't know how they ate. I don't know how they walked around. I don't know how they ate people. It shows this guy eating people. How could something like that eat people? How big were these people? Look at the beard coming out of here, because I'm going to show you Quetzalcoatl, or I already have, I don't know, but make sure you understand that beard. All right, and this is some nasty stuff. I think it might still be a little nasty. Same thing up here. They spit out. The beards have some very toxic stuff in them, I believe, because the one in the desert, woof, some of the nastiest toxic stuff I ever saw, and it came right out of the beard. Now this, he's a little different, I think, because I don't see anything squirting out of here. Certainly not like it was in the desert. This seems to all be coming out of his throat. But I can tell you what, I believe this is the end result of whatever spit right out of here. And if this thing was alive, it certainly would not have been a good day for that thing. Now, something to remember is whenever you see a lot of really dense green, usually it's blood. However, feathers do the same thing. They sell blood meal to make your plants extremely green. And also they sell feather meal. I'm not kidding you. They grind up feathers and they sell it for the same reason, to make your plants green. And that's what these feathers are. They call them the green mountains. And it's because of the nitrogen. It gives it a heavy nitrogen content, which absorbs sunlight or something. Yeah, I guess the chlorophyll, it makes the chlorophyll absorb sunlight better. That's what it is. This was all written about, exactly identical to what I will show you, was written in Apollodorus 1.6.3 Typhon. Type that in. Apollodorus 1.6.3 and then Typhon, Typhon. And you will see exactly, I'll read it to you later about this, but he's attacking the fish. It's the same thing that happened over there. Quetzalcoatl was attacking something. I don't know what it was, but he was spitting stuff out. Whether he just died and spit it out by accident, I don't know. This guy appears to have been trying to kill this fish, and it ate through his vital flesh up here. We could see actually down right into the blood vessels. It's stunning. Now this is the dragon's head right here. You see that? That's his head. I'm going to just trace around it. Here he is right up here. That's his nose. It comes around. And he's all this flary, fluty stuff coming down his back. There's his red flared eye. As you will read in Apollodorus, it says he had a red flared eye. He had all unkempt hair and feathers and so forth apparently coming down his back. This is the fluty looking thing that you see in the parades in China and so forth. This is the bottom of his throat, comes down this way here. Inside there is his actual throat, is right here, and we're going to follow it right down. This is his beards. Remember I talked about his beards and how nasty they were, and he spit all that stuff down. Now, we're going to go in for real good details in a second, but let's just get an overall. All right, this, again, is his head. Here's his throat. All the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Right there is where he bled out in the desert. And it's gashed straight across. And remember before I talked about the blood meal and the bone meal? Well, right there, there's a source of water there, but it's also heavily infused with blood metals, which made it turn extremely green in the middle of the desert. So don't forget, this is the fluty looking stuff that comes all the way down the dragon's, and this is all his feathers and whatever it is. It explains exactly what it is in Apollodorus. Very, very detailed. And all of this stuff is the runoff of a dead, decaying body. This is what they call effluent. Here's where his body really is. So can I show you that? Yes, I can. And is it dragon scaled? Yes, it is. The whole thing is dragon scales, right down the line here. You see it? And there's his throat. And here's outside of his throat to protect his throat from somebody trying to cut him, and he did. I mean, this is just so spectacular. I have no explanation, so don't point fingers at me. I'm showing you what's here. People want to assault me for showing what's here. Try to deal with what's here and then think about it. All right, here's what he bled out in the desert. Black and red is the colors of blood. Black is deoxygenated blood, and red has the extra oxygen. And that is what makes plants grow green, green, green. Now look at this. This was the cut, and this is also written about exactly in Apollodorus. Look at the green. Look at that. That's from blood meal. All right, there's a little bit of water coming out of here because that's what, plumbing, this is really plumbing. All right, it's plumbing. That's coming out of an artery. So it's still dragging up some red blood with it. And that's why it's so fertile. Now there's another place that's fertile in here too. And that's where it would poop. So where would it poop? Here's his head. It runs all the way across North Africa over to here. Remember the fluty looking tail? I'll show you the dragon scales over here. I showed you the dragon scales on his throat. This is his body. This whole thing is his body. And the tail comes over here. He poops right out of the end of his body, just like my dog has this very similar look to him. And that's where they poop. These are the legs. And in Apollodorus it says he had the thighs of a human. and then tentacles that went all the way across North Africa. And that is some kind of leather from some kind of a tentacle. Now, let's look at where they're living in the poop, because it's very fertile. Nobody's living in the desert here, hardly. But over here, right there, that's where the feces comes out. And this is exactly where it comes out, right this tube. That's it right there. So there's still some form of runoff of feces coming out of there. I followed the whole thing through, the whole digestive system. And right down here, they're living where the most fertile area is, which is bird poop. Because these are avian creatures. Now, then the tail continues on. See, that's the tail coming out. Here's his body. There's the tail, and there's where he poops. And coming way out here, I'll just show you this, which is the dragon scales out here. Look at the size of these things. And look at the construction of them. They're made out of plates. Look at the construction of them. They're made out of plates, different types of materials. You see how they're completely different, some of them. Let me see if I can turn around and get a different view. Look at that. Those are dragon scales. Can you imagine? It's just absolutely crazy. But, you know, if you can't deal with what you see, then that's your issue. Because I'm showing what is here. Now, think about it. Don't dismiss it out of hand. Now, remember I told you he ate right into the fish, and his toxins were just like the ones we saw going into the Gulf over there in the United States. Here he's spitting out all of this noxious stuff. Now, remember I talked about his beard? Here's the beard. This was one beard, and here's the other beard. You see how cool that thing looks? Yikes. Look at that. Now, the other one has been issuing this nasty stuff out of it. See it? This is the other beard. And all of this stuff appears to be coming out of that beard. Looks like it to me. All right, and they come flowing forward down to the fish to kill it. And it came right down here and landed on this fish's back. Now, a crazy thing was written about the earth opening up to swallow up something that was going to kill something, and it ended up going off to this direction and getting swallowed up over here and making an absolute disastrous mess over here. But it was like siphoned off out of really doing the kind of damage you saw on the East Coast there, in the United States. This all ran off down there. Now, this is what hit the fish. Look at this. All right, don't forget, it's coming out of Typhon down to the fish. This is the fin. Do you see the fish here? Hopefully you understand what we're looking at. That's the fish. He has a fin like most fish. The tail is back here. It comes down around here. His eyeball, I believe, is right there. This, I don't know exactly what that is, but it doesn't matter. These scales go this way. We're going to actually look at where it actually burnt right into his flesh. And I think Typhon, Quetzalcoatl had the same sort of venom. Now watch this. It's coming down and landing on that vital flesh. This is pink and not deteriorated like this. We're going to actually see the blood vessels, veins and arteries. Look at this. Now take your time. And if you know anybody that's a doctor, ask them. Say, what do you see here? And they will see, we see blood vessels, we see arteries. These are arteries with little blood vessels all the way down to the capillaries. These down here, these little bitty ones are the capillaries. Capillaries are where there's a whole batch of different pressurization points in arteries, basically. And that's where they squirt out oxygen, they squirt out other things. Normally that's where the capillaries do it. These are the big feeders, the arteries. These are the feed. Now, wherever you see, and remember I talked about the red blood? This is all red blood. That's why all this stuff is growing in here. You see, it's growing. It's not growing out here. There's nothing growing out here. It's growing everywhere where there's red blood. All life loves red blood. Now, what is that black stuff underneath? What is this black looking river here? That's a vein. These are the transition zones between the blood and the capillaries and the vein. And the vein scoops up all of this residue and brings it back to the heart to get recharged. You're looking at biology, my friends. Absolute stunning biology. And that's because it ate through the top layer of flesh, so we can see all these things happening. It's stunning. Alright, it appears they knew about the dragon. This is a map from 1375 called the Atlas Catalan Abraham Kresk. And here's what we see over here is the dragon. You see, this is Straits of Gibraltar. This is the dragon, which is the Atlas Mountains. And look, lo and behold, his throat is cut. And these are all dragon scales. And he runs all the way across, exactly where he is. And then there's other ones that are around. The Earth has had a lot of dragons. Well, I just showed you two of them here, and I know there's a lot of other ones. There's the one, I think there was one up in the Bosnian area, which Sam Osmagao, which I think is how you pronounce his last name, and it might be up in here somewhere. Anyway, there's a lot to prove what I'm talking about. That was Typhon. A lot of these ancient myths were not myths, and they were. No one in their right mind would ever even consider to think about this. That's why I did.